when we live in unhealthy footwear that's shoving our toes together, that big toe starts to dive in, more pressure goes through the medial side of that big toe. And then what does bone do when it's under more load? It grows. And so bunion is that bone growth of that bone trying to protect itself from constantly diving through the medial side of that big toe. Where a healthy foot would have a nice wide toe splay and full big toe extension to where you're actually able to push off of your big toe and you're not diving through the medial side of it.
Welcome to the Joint Pain Podcast, where we have discussions on the science and art of joint pain and longevity. I'm your host, Matthew Lister, the founder of Align Pain Management. Welcome back to the Joint Pain Podcast. Joining me today is my lovely wife, Jaylee Lister. She's been on the show a few times.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And today we are talking how to fix foot pain. And we're going to do this a little bit differently today. So we're going to start by answering the question, if we were intentionally trying to destroy a foot, how would we do it? You ready?
Yeah.
Great.
It's kind of fun.
Just do what everybody is doing in our society to begin with. That's basically it. Okay, so point number one, we would jam your feet into modern, unhealthy footwear. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so modern unhealthy footwear, what that looks like is really narrow toe boxes, really rigid soles and rigid shoes that don't allow your foot to move, and then throwing arch support under your arches, throwing lots of cushion under your feet as well, almost to the point where it's unstable and like you're walking on a pillow. I think what's interesting to think about too is how did we end up here? Like, how did our shoes get to being this unhealthy for our feet in the first place? And so in medieval Europe, the upper and middle class would wear a style of pointed shoe that showed that they were of the upper and middle class. And then the working class would have really wide shoes. And so we are living in the hangover of that, pointed shoes no longer are a symbol of wealth or status, but it is considered fashionable, and people tend to think that they're cute.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too because around the same time in medieval China is when they started foot binding, and so binding women's feet so they were smaller and more petite was considered, what their culture wanted, and ended up destroying a lot of women's feet. I had a friend in high school, his great grandma had that happen to her feet, and she was in a wheelchair for the latter part of her life because of it. And so thankfully that's not happening anymore.
I mean, it is to a certain extent. We're still doing foot binding. We're just doing it with cute shoes.
Yeah, it's modern day foot binding is what's happening.
Yeah. So what's actually happening in the foot when a foot goes into modern unhealthy footwear? Like biomechanically, what's happening?
Well, your foot has 26 bones, over 33 joints, and over 200 muscles. And so the foot in itself is almost its own machine. Like there's lots of working parts to the feet. But what happens when you put them into a shoe is it shoves those toes together and it creates a lot of rigidity in the foot, which kind of turns the foot almost into a wooden board. And so the foot isn't able to act like a foot anymore. It's acting like a shoe or a wooden peg to a degree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the other problematic piece of modern unhealthy footwear is when you get those toes jammed into the front of that pointed shoe. What the research shows is that you'll cut off blood supply to the plantar fascia by up to 50%. And so you'll start to see the plantar fascia actually begin to die off, and it just reduces its ability to heal and adapt to stimulus. And so plantar fasciitis and plantar fasciopathy, when those tissues actually begin to die, are rampant in our society, in no small part due to modern unhealthy footwear.
Yeah.
Okay, so point number two, if we were trying to destroy a foot, we would ignore them and expect them to work properly in modern society without intentional maintenance. I think there's a mentality in our culture that we just expect our joints, but especially our feet, to just work right, and we don't have to take care of them. We don't have to take care of them like we do our teeth. We brush our teeth twice a day, 3 times a day in order to prevent decay, but we can completely ignore our feet for decades on end and expect there to be no consequences. And so if we were trying to destroy a foot, I would definitely say keep the normal mentality of shoving your feet in shoes, expect them to work properly, and expect them to not be in pain until you are faced with the consequences of that lie.
Mm-hmm. It's just like maintaining a car. Like when you buy a brand new car, you know that you have to change the oil, change the tires, get new brakes. You're expecting to maintain it. We have to have the same attitude towards our body and especially our feet.
Yep. Number 3, let your feet get weak.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with weakness through the feet is strength of your big toe and your arches. And so the big toes often really get overlooked when it comes to things like plantar fasciitis. They think it's a problem with the arch, but really it's a big toe mobility and stability issue. And so I think keeping that big toe really strong, as well as the arches on the bottom of the foot, is really important, and is a big missing piece to foot pain in its entirety. That's also how bunions and hammer toes happen. When we live in unhealthy footwear that's shoving our toes together, that big toe starts to dive in. More pressure goes through the medial side of that big toe. And then what does bone do when it's under more load? It grows. And so bunion is that bone growth of that bone trying to protect itself from constantly diving through the medial side of that big toe. Where a healthy foot would have a nice wide toe splay and full big toe extension to where you're actually able to push off of your big toe and you're not diving through the medial side of it.
Number 4, let your ankles get weak. So when your ankles get weak and stiff, essentially, they lose the ability to adapt to stimulus. You lose control over your ankles. And so a lot of times you'll see people walking and their feet will be turned out or their feet will be turned in, and you're not getting a clean, healthy gait cycle. And the reason that's so effective at destroying your feet is that it just creates these hyper-focused areas of load when you lose the ability to get the ankle into the right position, basically straight ahead. Mm-hmm. Number 5, let your glutes get weak. Why does your glutes getting weak contribute to foot destruction?
Well, in our past podcasts, we've talked about glute weakness for a lot of the other painful areas like your low back and your hips and your knees. The glute is a huge lateral hip stabilizer when you're walking, and the glute and the feet really work hand in hand. When your glute is strong and stable, it allows your feet to be able to be more strong and stable, and then vice versa, right? They both have to be strong and stable to support the whole structure of your body. And so intentionally not taking care of your glutes is going to shove more load into your feet and into your ankles and into that muscle tissue down there that your feet aren't going to be able to tolerate. And then it's going to, in turn, create problems in the feet and in the hips. And so, just keeping that lateral hip stability really strong supports the foundation of your foot farther up the chain. And I think what's really important for all 3 of those things, foot, ankle, and glute weakness and strength, is when people don't spend time barefoot. I think a lot of people spend way too much time in shoes, especially when they're at home walking around their house, right? They're shoving their foot into like a narrow slipper or wearing their shoes around the house, and they're not allowing their feet to be free, which in turn keeps them stronger and more stable throughout their lifetime.
Yep, absolutely. So let's flip it. What are the principles for fixing foot pain and performing at a high level? So these are basically the inverse of the previous principles. So number 1, wear healthy footwear most of the time, and use toe spacers to mobilize toes and feet when necessary.
These are toe spacers. They are silicone, and what you do is you put these between your toes so that you can work on a healthy toe splay. So if your feet are shoved together in shoes, we want to help them splay back out and get their healthy range of motion back. So these are part of that. And I just mentioned, spending more time barefoot around the house. These are a really good way of doing that to restore healthy function to your feet. We recommend at first people start for 5 to 15 minutes and make sure that that is tolerable by the foot. And then, after that, progressing 4+ hours. But doing this a couple times a week is great to help restore the healthy position of a wide toe splay. And what are the 3 things that a healthy shoe should have to support the feet?
So the 3 things that healthy footwear will have is one is adequate room for your toes to splay, adequate width through the forefoot. And you can test that by taking the insole out of your shoe, putting it on the ground, putting your foot on the insole, and spreading your toes out. And if when you spread your toes out on your insole, your toes hang over the edge of the insole, then those shoes aren't going to be wide enough to allow your feet to act like feet inside that shoe. Mm-hmm. So number 1 is adequate width for your toes to splay. Number 2 is a flexible enough sole that your foot can act like a foot inside of the shoe. It can bend, it can twist. And then point number 3 is 0 or minimal drop. So not having a big heel hike, not having 10, 15, 20 millimeters of drop from heel to toe, leaving that Achilles tendon in a shortened position, not changing the angle of the pelvis. And so those would be the 3 things.
Yeah. So let's go through some shoes. Let's start with the most unhealthy, and then we'll go to the most healthy. So the most unhealthy, which we kind of talked about earlier, is that fashion footwear that has a really narrow toe box. So these are boots. They have a little bit of a heel hike, right, which we don't want for a healthy foot. Really narrow toe box, and they're pretty rigid. They have a little bit of a toe bend, but this heel is not moving at all. The more extreme version of that would be a high heel, right? This is basically forcing your foot to walk on its tiptoes. Very narrow toe box and very, very rigid. This is not allowing your foot to be a foot. And then the male equivalent to that is a dress shoe, right? Again, a really narrow toe box, rigidity, and a little bit of a hike. So what we mean by spending most of your time in healthy footwear is, yes, you may need to wear something like this for a wedding or a formal event that you're required to have dress clothes for, but the majority of your life should not have to be spent in this. And if it is, if you're a lawyer or have a job that requires it, spending more time at home in those toe spacers is going to be really, really, really important for you.
Yeah, and I think an important point to this is choices have consequences, right? And I often hear, but those are cute, or I don't like the look of healthier footwear. That's fine. We're just here to let people know that choices have consequences, and if you spend most of your time in fashion footwear, you will end up with plantar fasciitis, you will end up with foot surgeries, you will end up with destroyed feet, and you will lose the ability to walk and enjoy life in your 70s, even late 60s, in your 80s. And it's just choices and consequences.
Yeah, and the trend is headed towards healthy footwear, and there's also now a lot more options for cute, healthy footwear.
Yeah.
So moving on to conventional runners. This is where Nike and some of those more corporate shoe companies take the lead. Again, really narrow toe box, really, really, really rigid. It's not flexible at all. And there's a pretty dramatic heel hike between the heel and the toe. I would put Vans in this category too, mainly because a lot of people want to work out in Vans. Again, they're super rigid, very narrow toe box. No heel hike,
Yeah, it's a zero drop,
which
but
is a good, step in the right direction, but these are not going to allow your foot to be a foot.
no.
So if you're wearing those shoes now, it's like, okay, well, how do I make a change? What's the next step? And usually what I suggest for people is stepping to a more minimalist runner. So minimalist runners are a really good option because they're not quite a barefoot shoe, but they still allow your foot to be a foot. These are actually my personal Ultras. They have a nice wide toe box at the top. They're my trail running shoes, so they have more grip on the bottom. They're more flexible to allow my foot to have a little bit more of the mobility it needs. And there's no drop in this shoe. There's the heel is the same height as the toe. These are Flux footwear, which is another good minimalist wide toe box running option. These are really good for road running, right? Our feet were designed to be barefoot, but we weren't designed to be barefoot running on cement. And so having a little bit of that extra cushion on the bottom to create a barrier between us and cement is important, but also having that zero drop so our foot can still be a foot is fantastic. I would say Topos are also another good brand in that minimalist runner category of a good transition shoe.
Yeah, and I would say that transition shoes will still have some cushion. I don't think that cushion is necessarily bad. It's just you want to have an appropriate amount of cushion for how strong your feet are. Mm-hmm. If you have really weak feet, going to a pure minimalist barefoot shoe can absolutely flare your feet up. But moving to a transition shoe that's zero drop, wide toe box, but still has some cushion is really the best way to progress down. Mm-hmm. And some people never go to a full barefoot minimalist shoe. They just stay at a transition shoe, which in my opinion is totally fine.
Yeah. And a lot of my older clients who have structural damage in their feet, right? They spent too much time. They have a lot of structural damage already. I would never put them in a fully minimalist shoe. And people who are in orthotics need to be really careful with that transition, because if you go too minimalist too fast and your feet aren't functional and strong, it's going to make the pain and the structural damage worse instead of helping it. And so I would encourage those people in orthotics with foot pain to really seek an expert's not just their opinion, but their guidance and how to do that week over week.
Yeah, because essentially orthotics are just like a back brace for the feet, totally. Right? And so they're just going to weaken the feet. And so if you go from orthotics to a minimalist shoe, that's just going to be a big adjustment way too fast. And so just being very cautious to transition appropriately.
Totally. So moving on to minimalist barefoot shoes. These are a pair of Merrells. They're super flexible. Okay, I can roll this shoe into a ball. They have a nice wide toe box, and they're zero drop. Okay. Vivo barefoot shoes are also one of our favorites. Super flexible, can roll it into a ball, wide toe box, zero drop. Now, these do not have cushion, and so if you're running long distances on roads, I would not recommend this. But working out in the gym, kind of your everyday shoe, these are great. These are more of their athletic ones, so people are like, oh, they're not cute. I want cute shoes. There are cute options. So these are Vivo barefoots. They're leather and material, more of like a street shoe. This is the brand Witten. You can get these on Amazon for not that much. They offer a lot of different colors and styles. Again, still super flexible, wide toe box, but they would look cute with jeans or a blouse instead of athletic clothing. And then they also make boots. So these are my Vivo barefoot boots. Nice wide toe box, super flexible. Really healthy for your feet, but also keep you warm in winter when you need a more boot style shoe. And then lastly is barefoot sandals. So these are Bedrocks, super wide toe box, pretty flexible. They have grip on the bottom for hiking. A lot of PCT hikers have actually transitioned to these because they're super lightweight and beneficial to take long distances. However, to wear something like this, you have to be strong and have functional feet. You can't just go directly to something like this and expect your feet to be okay. It's always going to be a transitioning period. I think the last point I would like to make when it comes to shoes is if you have children or grandchildren, starting them in healthy footwear right from the beginning of their life. A lot of people have foot pain or structural damage in their feet because they have lived so many years with really unhealthy feet. So I brought our little 1-year-old's shoes. These are her little wide toe box sock shoes. I want to say the company is called Tiny Explorings. Super flexible, okay? 0 drop, but there's a little bit of grip and cushion on the bottom for her little feet. Babies' feet and toddlers' feet are so wide when they're growing. You want to make sure your child's foot is in a nice wide shoe with room that they can grow in that's not pushing their toes together. And then the Witten brand that I showed earlier, these are their kids' shoes. Again, they have Velcro, so if your toddler is before tying shoe age, they have options for a lot of different ages. So please get your shoes in Please get your kids in healthy footwear now so that you're preventing problems and don't have to take action on fixing problems later on in their life.
Okay, point number 2, if we are talking about principles for fixing foot pain and performing at a high level, having strong feet is a crucial point to discuss. What is your favorite exercises or way to strengthen feet?
My favorite exercises for feet at the beginning, maybe when someone has a lot of dysfunction, would be big toe presses and calf raises. They're pretty simple to do at the beginning stages of fixing foot stability problems. I think long term in the more advanced stages, I really love agility work like ladder work or balance work or jumping work. It requires so much strength from the feet to do those things that training that is really fun.
Those exercises done barefoot?
Yes, barefoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're doing long bouts of jump roping, then having a minimalist runner is helpful for that with a little bit of cushion between you and a cement floor if you're jump roping.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about having, let's go back to strong feet for a second. After your big toe has been adducted, once it's dove in, sometimes when you wear toe spacers and you strengthen the arches of your feet, particularly that abductor hallucis muscle, you can get that big toe and the toes to splay back out. Sometimes what happens is the tendon of the muscle on the outside of the big toe will actually jump its track and it will lose its ability to pull the big toe out. And so there is sort of a point of no return on getting that big toe to come back out. And sometimes that can be disheartening for people. And, you know, there's no imaging that you're going to do to confirm that. But it's still really important, even if you're not going to get that big toe back out, that you still strengthen your feet and strengthen the muscles that stabilize and push that big toe down, because that's still what's going to prevent plantar fasciitis. That's still what's going to prevent that plantar fascia dying off from lack of blood supply.
And you can have really strong functional feet that maybe don't look fully posturally aligned for the toes, right?
Yeah.
You can still have a very large bunion on your big toe, but your feet can be strong and stable again.
Yeah, absolutely. Point number 3, if we're talking about fixing foot pain and performing at a high level, having strong ankles. What is your favorite way to strengthen ankles?
My favorite way to strengthen ankles would be banded inversions and eversions, which people just tend to be really weak at. And then also calf raises. again, just strengthening that whole lower leg structure altogether.
Yep, absolutely. That's just going to create a nice stable ankle for the knee and the hip to rest upon. It's going to eliminate any misalignments in the ankle. I would agree those three are super crucial and should be in everybody's joint maintenance plan.
And I think not just doing calf raises off the floor, but progressing to elevated calf raises and then long-term getting to single leg calf raises. Walking and running require you to put all of your body weight on one foot. And so if you can't do a single leg calf raise effectively for 3 sets of 20 to 30, then your feet and your ankles are not strong enough.
Yep. Point number 4. Have strong glutes. What is your favorite way to strengthen glutes?
I mean, you just got to go with the classics, clamshells and outer thigh raises. But when you progress past those, I really love the side plank clamshell pop-ups for your glute medius and that lateral hip stability.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else to add? I think that's the recipe for fixing pain, preventing structural issues in the feet, and performing at a high level.
Yeah, and I think foot pain can be complex. You know, there can be local things happening in the foot and then things happening farther up at the chain in the hips and the low back. And so getting an expert's opinion and evaluation on what's actually going on with your body, that's all the things contributing to your foot pain, is always really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
If you want an expert's opinion on your foot pain, schedule a consultation today. And for more resources and information on shoes and healthy footwear, we have more information in the show notes. Thank you for watching the Joint Pain Podcast. I'm Matthew Lister, and if you want help walking through your chronic pain journey, you can find more information at experiencealign.com.